A rich man helped a woman settle in Alaska without telling her his reason. The ferry horn sounded once, low and hollow, then faded into the gray. Lena Harper stood at the edge of the dock, her boots half buried in packed snow, breath turning white as soon as it left her mouth. The wind coming off the water cut straight through her coat, the kind of cold that did not announce itself loudly. It simply stayed, persistent, uninterested in whether you were ready. She tightened her grip on the handle of her suitcase. It was smaller than most people carried when they moved this far north. Lighter too. If anyone had lifted it, they would have noticed immediately. Whatever life Lena had brought with her to Alaska, it fit into a single case and still left room to spare. The harbor was nearly empty. A fishing boat rocked slowly against the pier. Somewhere down the road, a door slammed, then nothing. No music, no chatter, just the wind moving through steel and rope. Lena looked out over the water, not searching for anything in particular, more like making sure there was no one left to say goodbye to. She did not shiver dramatically. She did not cry. She simply stood there, letting the cold do what it always did, stripping things down to what could not be avoided. Behind her, a man watched. Daniel Frost leaned against an old truck parked just beyond the dock lights. The engine was off. His hands were in his coat pockets. He had been there long enough that his presence felt less like an arrival and more like part of the place itself. He did not stare. He did not rush. He noticed details the way some people noticed weather. The way Lena stood slightly angled to the wind, protecting the left side of her body. The pause before each breath. The suitcase that looked more like something brought for a visit than a permanent move. Daniel did not step forward. Not yet. A gust swept across the dock, sharper than the rest. Lena exhaled slowly, then adjusted the strap of her bag on her shoulder. The movement was small, but it was enough. Daniel pushed away from the truck. His boots made a muted sound against the snow as he crossed the distance between them. He stopped a few feet away, close. Enough to be heard, far enough not to crowd her. "It gets colder once the sun drops," he said. His voice was calm, even, the kind that did not compete with the wind. Lena turned, surprised, but not startled. Her eyes flicked to him, then briefly past him, checking the space around. Old habit. She nodded once. "I figured," she said. Daniel glanced at the sky, where the light was already thinning, the gray deepening by the minute. "You waiting for someone?" he asked. "No, Lena answered." She hesitated, then added, "I am just here." Daniel accepted that without comment. He looked back toward the road that led into town, where a single street light glowed faintly through the falling snow. "There's a place about 5 miles in," he said. "Warm coffee. A phone that works when the weather cooperates." He did not frame it as an invitation. He did not say she should follow him. He simply stated a fact and waited. Lena studied his face. There was nothing sharp about it. No urgency. No practiced friendliness. Just a man standing in the cold, as if he had nowhere else he needed to be. "I have not decided where I am staying yet," she said. "That is fine," Daniel replied. "Most people do not, the first day." The wind picked up again, lifting loose snow across the dock in thin sheets. Lena looked down at her boots, then back at the road, then finally at her suitcase. Daniel noticed the moment she made the decision, even before she spoke. "All right," Lena said quietly. "I could use some directions." Daniel nodded once. He turned toward the truck and walked ahead without checking to see if she followed. After a beat, Lena picked up her suitcase and stepped after him, her footprints settling into the snow behind his. Neither of them spoke as they reached the vehicle. The harbor fell silent again, the dock lights flickering as the ferry pulled away, leaving the cold exactly as it had been before. And somewhere between the water and the road into town, a question took shape, unanswered. Why this man had noticed her at all, and why he had chosen not to look away. The road into town narrowed quickly, the dock lights disappearing behind them, as if someone had turned a dial. Daniel drove without music. The truck moved steadily, tires crunching. Overpacked snow, headlights cutting a clean tunnel through the dark. Outside, Alaska did not rush to introduce itself. Trees stood close together, heavy with frost, branches bent and quiet. The world felt held in place by cold. Lena sat with her hands folded in her lap, the suitcase at her feet. The heater hummed softly, warm air brushing against her boots, then her knees. She did not comment on it. She only noticed that her shoulders had lowered at some point without her deciding to. A shape moved at the edge of the road. Daniel slowed slightly. A dog stepped into the light, thick fur pale against the snow. It paused, watching the truck with calm curiosity, tail still. Daniel rolled down the window halfway. "Go on," he said. The dog lingered for a second longer, then turned and vanished back into the trees, leaving nothing behind but disturbed snow and silence. Lena exhaled, not realizing she had been holding her breath. "Does that happen often?" she asked. Daniel nodded. "More than you would expect." The town appeared gradually. A gas station. A diner with yellow lights spilling onto the snow. A few buildings pressed close together, as if for warmth. No roofs, no cutouts. Alaska did not perform for newcomers. Daniel did not stop. They passed through, then out again, onto a narrower road that climbed gently away from the harbor. Snow fell more steadily here, soft flakes catching in the headlights. After a few minutes, he turned off onto a side road. The trees opened just enough to reveal a small cabin, set back from the path. Smoke curled from the chimney, thin and steady. Daniel parked and turned off the engine. For a moment, neither of them moved. The quiet settled around the truck, deeper now, broken only by the faint ticking of cooling metal. "This is it," Daniel said. He stepped out first, snow crunching under his boots, then walked around to the passenger side and opened the door. Cold rushed in immediately, sharp and clean. Lena stepped down, pulling her coat tighter as the wind brushed past her face. The cabin was simple. One story, wood darkened by time and weather. A single window glowed with warm light, soft and steady. Daniel took her suitcase without asking. It was lighter than he had expected. He did not comment on that either. Inside, the air was warm, not overheated, just enough. The smell of wood and coffee lingered, faint but present. A small table sat near the window, 2 chairs pulled in. A shelf held a few hardback books, their spines worn but clean. A mechanical clock ticked quietly on the wall. Daniel set the suitcase down near the door. "There is water," he said, gesturing toward the counter. "Heat stays on. Wood is stacked outside if you need it." He did not explain ownership. He did not outline terms. Lena walked a few steps into the room, taking it in slowly. The way the light softened the corners. The way the floor felt solid under her boots. The way the cold stopped pressing quite so hard against her skin. "This is more than temporary," she said. Daniel shrugged out of his coat and hung on a hook by the door. Beneath it, his sweater was plain. Dark, thick. "It is warm," he replied. "That is what matters tonight." He crossed the room and poured water into a kettle, setting it on the stove. The movements were practiced, unhurried. He did not ask if she wanted tea. He did not announce what he was doing. The kettle began to heat, a low sound filling the space. Outside, snow tapped softly against the window. Lena set her bag down near the chair and removed her gloves, placing them neatly on the table. Her fingers tingled as the warmth reached them. She flexed them once, then stilled. "Thank you," she said. Daniel inclined his head just slightly. "There is no rush to decide anything," he said. "Town is 5 minutes back the way we came. You can look around tomorrow." The kettle whistled. Daniel poured the water, steam rising in slow curls. He slid one mug across the table toward her. Lena wrapped her hands around it. The heat seeped in, steady and patient. Through the window, the snow continued to fall, thickening the world outside until the road was barely visible. Inside, the clock ticked on. The light did not flicker. And for the first time since the ferry dock, the cold stayed where it belonged, on the other side of the glass. Morning arrived without ceremony. There was no alarm, no sudden light, just a slow change in the color of the snow outside the window, shifting from deep gray to something lighter, almost blue. Daniel Frost was already awake. He moved quietly through the cabin, socks against the wooden floor, steps measured as if the space itself were listening. The stove was cold when he reached it. He opened the door, added 2 pieces of wood, then another, stacking them with care. The match flared once, briefly, before settling into a steady flame. He checked the kettle. Empty. Water came next. Not rushed. Not filled to the brim. Enough. While it heated, Daniel pulled a hand grinder from the shelf. The metal was cool against his palm. He measured the beans by feel, not by scale, then began to turn the handle. The sound was soft, rhythmic, a small, deliberate effort repeated without variation. Outside, snow continued to fall. Thick flakes drifted past the window, blurring the tree line until the world felt reduced to just the cabin and the space immediately around it. Lena Harper watched from the doorway. She had woken to the sound of movement, not voices. She stood there for a moment, wrapped in the borrowed blanket, observing without announcing herself. Daniel did not turn. He did not react to her presence. He finished grinding the coffee, set it aside, then poured the hot water slowly, watching the surface rise and settle. Everything he did followed a pattern. Not rigid, not mechanical, intentional. Daniel sat at the small table near the window, mug in hand, eyes resting on the snow outside. He did not check a phone. He did not look at the clock on the wall. The seconds passed anyway. Lena stepped fully into the room, her boots left by the door. "Good morning," she said. Daniel inclined his head slightly. "Morning." That was all. He stood, poured another mug, and placed it across from his own. He did not push it toward her. He did not wait for her to sit. Lena took the seat. The coffee was strong, clean, warming in a way that felt deliberate, not indulgent. Daniel drank his slowly. After a while, he rose again, pulled on his coat, and reached for a pair of gloves. By the door, a leash hung neatly on a hook. A husky appeared as if summoned by the movement, padding in from the back of the cabin. Thick fur, pale eyes, calm posture. Daniel clipped the leash on without speaking. "I will be back in a bit," he said. No explanation of where. No assumption that she would stay or go. Lena nodded. The door closed behind him, sealing the warmth inside. From the window, she watched Daniel and the dog move down the narrow path, their footprints pressing clean shapes into the untouched snow. Their pace was steady, unhurried, as if time was something to be walked alongside, not escaped. Inside, the cabin held its temperature. The fire crackled softly. The clock continued to tick. Lena stood, rinsed her mug, and set it upside down on the counter. She noticed how everything had a place. Not labeled, not obvious, but used enough to feel earned. When Daniel returned, his boots were dusted with snow, his breath visible for a moment before fading. He removed his coat, hung it carefully, then knelt to wipe the dog's paws with a towel kept by the door. The dog stood still, accustomed to the ritual. Afterward, Daniel washed his hands. Cold water first, then warm. He sat again, opened one of the hardback books on the shelf, and read without marking the page. The day unfolded like that. Small actions, repeated, anchored. Daniel chopped wood, carried it inside, stacked it neatly. He checked the weather radio once, volume low, listening only long enough to confirm what the sky had already told him. Lena watched, not intruding, not ignored. At no point did Daniel explain his schedule. At no point did he invite questions. And yet, nothing about his presence felt closed. In the afternoon, he repaired a loose hinge on the cabinet door. He worked slowly, testing the movement after each adjustment. When it closed without sound, he stopped. That was enough. Outside, the snow eased, then began again. Inside, the light shifted, softer now, golden where it touched the wood. Daniel prepared a simple meal. Soup, bread. He placed 2 bowls on the table without comment. They ate in near silence. Not empty, not tense, just quiet. As the sky darkened, Daniel lit a single lamp near the window. He did not turn on the overhead light. The glow stayed low, contained. The cabin felt smaller, safer. Lena realized something then. This was not a place built to impress. It was built to be lived in. And Daniel Frost moved through it, as if each day was something to be handled with care, not conquered. Outside, Alaska pressed in, with cold and darkness. Inside, the routine held. Steady, quiet, enough. The next morning unfolded the same way the first one had. Light arrived quietly, settling on the snow outside the cabin before touching anything inside. Daniel Frost moved through his routine without checking whether Lena Harper was awake. He did not knock on the door to the small room she had slept in. He did not ask what her plans were. He let the day be what it was. Lena woke on her own, the cabin already warm, the smell of coffee faint but familiar now. She dressed slowly, folding the blanket before leaving the room, placing it back exactly where she had found it. Daniel was at the table by the window, reading. The husky lay at his feet, eyes half closed, tail still. "Morning," Lena said. Daniel looked up, closed the book without marking the page, and nodded. "There is coffee." She poured her own. They sat in the same quiet they had shared the day before. It did not ask anything from either of them. After breakfast, Lena pulled on her coat. "I'm going to look for work," she said. Daniel did not ask where. He did not offer advice. "There is a lodge about 3 miles south," he replied after a moment. "They usually need help this time of year." "Thank you," she said. He opened the door for her, then stepped aside. The wind met her immediately, sharp and awake. She adjusted her scarf and started down the path toward the road. Daniel watched from the doorway until she disappeared between the trees, then closed the door and returned to what he had been doing. He did not follow. Lena walked until the cabin was out of sight, the snow deepening as the road curved away. Her breath came steady. The cold burned, then settled. The lodge stood where Daniel had said it would, a low building with wide windows and a porch cleared just enough to be usable. Smoke rose from its chimney, thicker than the one at the cabin. Inside, the warmth was louder. Voices, boots on wood, a bell above the door. Lena spoke to the woman at the desk, answered questions simply, honestly. When asked where she was staying, she gave a general answer. Near the trees. A cabin. No elaboration. By the afternoon, she had a temporary position. Cleaning rooms. Sorting books in the small reading area when it was quiet. Nothing glamorous. Enough. She returned to the cabin as the light began to fade, snow clinging to the hem of her coat. Daniel was outside, splitting wood. Each movement was measured, controlled. He did not stop when he saw her. She waited until he finished the log he was working on, then spoke. "I start tomorrow," she said. Daniel leaned the axe against the stump. "Good. That was it." She stepped inside, removed her boots, and hung her coat on the hook beneath his. The space did not feel crowded. That night, she cooked. Not because she felt expected to, because the ingredients were there and the day had asked something of her. Soup again. Different spices. Bread warmed on the stove. Daniel ate without comment. When he finished, he rinsed his bowl and set it to dry. Over the next few days, a rhythm formed. Lena left in the mornings, returned before dark. Sometimes earlier, sometimes later. She did not announce her schedule. Daniel did not ask. He continued his routines. Coffee, wood, the dog, reading. Repairs made before they became problems. They spoke, but only when something needed to be said. Once, Lena noticed the dog waiting by the door, ears alert, leash untouched on the hook. "You take him out every morning," she said. Daniel glanced at the clock. It was later than usual. "Yes," he replied. She reached for her coat. "I can do it." Daniel hesitated, then handed her the leash without ceremony. She took the dog down the path, the leash warm in her hand, the animal calm at her side. When she returned, Daniel was already back to work. The moment passed without acknowledgement. It happened like that often. Small exchanges. No weight placed on them. One evening, Lena sat at the table, sorting a stack of books she had borrowed from the lodge library. She stopped at one with a cracked spine, hesitated, then reached for tape. Daniel watched from across the room. "You do not have to fix that," he said. She smiled faintly. "I know." She fixed it anyway. Later, she placed the book back on the shelf, aligning it with the others, not drawing attention to the repair. Daniel did not comment. Another night, the wind rose suddenly, rattling the windows. Lena paused mid-step, then continued. On, closing the latch with a firm but unhurried motion. Daniel noticed the way she checked it once, then let it be. No second guesses. No fuss. As days passed, Lena did not ask where Daniel had come from. She did not ask why the cabin was empty except for him. She did not ask how long he planned to stay in Alaska. She asked where the extra towels were. She asked whether the dog preferred dry food or canned. She asked if the road iced over near the bend by the creek. Questions rooted in now, not then. One evening, as they sat with their mugs by the window, watching snow fall thick and steady, Lena spoke without turning toward him. "I like it here," she said. Daniel waited. "It is quiet," she added, "but it does not feel empty." He nodded once. Outside, the snow continued, covering the path they both used, softening the edges of everything that had been sharp. Inside, the light held. If you have ever walked into a place where nothing was demanded of you, where you were allowed to simply exist without explanation, then you know what Lena noticed next. The way the cabin stayed warm, even when the storm pressed hard against it. The way silence could sit between two people without becoming heavy. And how sometimes the safest presence is not the one that reaches out first, but the one that stays steady long enough for you to step closer on your own. The snow eased sometime during the night. By morning, the world outside the cabin looked quieter than before. The sharp edges softened, the path between the trees pressed flat by yesterday's steps. The air held still as if waiting. Daniel Frost was already outside when Lena Harper opened the door. He stood near the woodpile, not working this time, just watching the husky move through the snow with patient interest. The dog stopped, sniffed, then looked back at him, tail low and relaxed. Daniel said nothing. Lena pulled her coat tighter and stepped onto the porch. The cold reached her immediately, clean and awake, but it no longer felt like a challenge. "Morning," she said. Daniel turned slightly. "Morning." The dog trotted over to her, stopping a few feet away, as if checking for permission before coming closer. "He does that," Daniel said. "Waits." Lena nodded. She crouched and held out her hand, palm open. The dog approached, sniffed once, then leaned into the contact, solid and warm. She stood again, brushing snow from her gloves. "I have an early shift," she said. Daniel glanced at the sky. Clouds sat low, heavy but unmoving. "The road will be slick by the creek." "I will walk the longer way," Lena replied. Daniel considered this for a moment, then nodded. "That is better." They stood there for a few seconds longer, neither of them in a hurry to break the quiet. Lena started down the path, her boots sinking into the packed snow. After a few steps, she stopped and turned back. "There is extra soup from last night," she said. "On the stove." Daniel nodded again. "Thank you." At the lodge, the day unfolded slowly. Beds made, shelves sorted, windows wiped clean of frost from the inside. Lena worked without rushing, her movements efficient but unforced. When her shift ended, the light outside had already begun to fade. She walked back toward the cabin as the sky deepened to blue, then gray. The air felt heavier now, snow beginning to fall again, fine and steady. Halfway up the path, she saw Daniel ahead of her. He was walking back from the direction of the road, the husky at his side, leash loose. He slowed when he noticed her, then stopped, allowing her to catch up. "Did you take the long way?" he asked. "Yes," Lena said. He nodded. "Good." They walked together the rest of the distance, not close enough to brush against each other, not far apart either. Their footsteps fell into an easy rhythm, snow crunching softly underfoot. At the cabin, Daniel opened the door and stepped aside, letting her enter first. Inside, the warmth met them immediately, the familiar scent of wood and coffee lingering. Lena hung her coat and boots. Daniel did the same. She moved to the stove and checked the pot. Still warm. Daniel took a bowl from the shelf and set it on the counter, then another. He did not assume she would eat. He did not wait for her answer. They sat at the table near the window, steam rising between them. The snow outside thickened, the world narrowing again to the cabin and the space it held. After a few minutes, Lena spoke. "There's a small library at the lodge," she said. "They let staff borrow books." Daniel looked at the cover of the one she had placed near him earlier that day. The repaired spine held. "I saw," he said. "They were going to throw some of them out," Lena added. "Older ones." Daniel glanced at the shelf along the wall. "There is room." She nodded once. No more was said. Later, the wind picked up, pushing against the walls with a low, constant sound. The fire burned steadily, the light from the lamp pooling across the table and floor. Daniel stood and checked the latch on the window, pressing it once to be sure. Lena watched, not because she felt concerned, but because the action was precise, contained. When he returned to his seat, the quiet settled again. After a while, Lena reached for her mug, then paused. "Do you mind if I take the dog out?" she asked. Daniel looked at the clock. "He has already been." "I know," she said. "Just around the cabin." Daniel considered this, then handed her the leash. She clipped it on, pulled on her coat, and stepped outside. The dog moved easily beside her, the path already familiar. When she returned, Daniel had added another log to the fire. He did not comment on the time she had taken. As the evening deepened, they sat in the same room, doing separate things. Lena read. Daniel sharpened a knife at the counter, slow strokes, careful pressure. At one point, the dog shifted and rested its head against Lena's knee. She did not react immediately. She let it be, her hand eventually resting against its fur, light and unclaimed. Daniel noticed. He said nothing. Outside, the snow fell harder, erasing the earlier footprints, covering the path once again. Inside, two people shared the same space without needing to define it. If you have ever felt the difference between being noticed and being examined, you understand what made this moment distinct. No questions were asked. No boundaries were tested. It was simply the first time warmth had moved naturally between them, quiet and unannounced, like the fire holding steady while the storm pressed on outside. The morning began like the others. Light came slowly, easing its way across the snow until the trees outside the cabin looked almost soft. Daniel Frost moved through his routine without variation. Coffee, the dog, a quiet check of the stove. The clock on the wall marked the hour, but he did not look at it for long. Lena Harper was already awake. She stood near the window, pulling on her boots, her coat folded over the back of the chair. The cabin felt settled now, as if it had learned their presence and adjusted accordingly. "I have an early shift," she said. Daniel nodded. "I will be out as well." She paused, surprised. "Out, yes." That was all he offered. They left together, the husky trotting ahead for a few steps before falling back into place at Daniel's side. The road toward town lay quiet, snow packed down hard from the night before. At the bend near the creek, Daniel stopped. "I will take this way," he said, gesturing toward the shorter path that cut through the trees. Lena looked at him, then at the road leading to the lodge. "That does not go anywhere." Daniel met her gaze. "It does." She considered this, then nodded once. "See you later." They separated there, her footsteps heading south, his disappearing into the trees. At the lodge, the day started as expected. Rooms to clean, supplies to restock, the hum of quiet conversations drifting through the halls. Lena worked steadily, not rushing, not lingering. She was halfway through folding towels when she heard the sound of a door opening at the far end of the hall. Heavy boots. Unfamiliar. She looked up. Daniel stood there, coat off, sleeves rolled just enough to be practical. He held a clipboard in one hand, the other resting loosely at his side. The lodge manager stood beside him, speaking in a low voice, gesturing toward a stack of supplies near the maintenance closet. Lena froze, not because Daniel was there, but because he was wearing the same plain work gloves as the rest of the staff. The manager noticed her first. "Lena," she called, "this is Daniel. He is helping out today." "Helping out." Daniel glanced toward Lena, his expression unchanged. "Morning," he said. She stared at him for a second longer than she intended to. "You work here?" she asked. "No," Daniel replied. Then, after a beat, "Today." The manager handed him the clipboard and moved on, already distracted by another problem further down the hall. Lena watched as Daniel walked toward the maintenance closet, set the clipboard down, and picked up a broom. Not hesitantly, not awkwardly, as if this was simply another task to be done. He began sweeping the entryway, movements efficient, unshowy. He did not look around to see who was watching. He did not try to blend in by exaggerating effort. He just worked. Lena felt heat rise unexpectedly, sharp and unwelcome. She crossed the hall toward him. "You do not have to do that." Daniel continued sweeping. "It needs doing." "That is not what I meant." He stopped then, resting the broom against the wall. "I know." She searched his face for something. An explanation. A hint. Anything that would place this where she could understand it. There was nothing there. You could have said something, she said. Daniel met her eyes. You did not ask. That stopped her. She stepped back, crossing her arms, then uncrossing them when she realized the gesture did not suit her. People will talk, she said. They usually do, Daniel replied. He picked the broom up again and returned to the task. Lena stood there, unsettled in a way she had not been since arriving in Alaska. This was not the quiet she understood. This was something else. Throughout the morning, Daniel moved through the lodge like someone who belonged nowhere and everywhere at once. He fixed a loose railing near the stairs. He shoveled the front steps. He carried boxes from the supply truck without comment. When someone thanked him, he nodded and moved on. No one asked where he came from. No one asked why he was there. Lena watched from a distance, her work slowing despite herself. At lunch, she sat at a table near the window, soup untouched in front of her. Daniel entered a few minutes later, took a seat at the far end of the room, and ate quietly. She noticed the way he did not sit with the others. Not out of distance, simply because there was space. After a while, she stood and walked over. You're going to get tired, she said. Daniel looked up. That passes. She frowned. That is not an answer. He considered this. It is enough of one. She shook her head, then surprised herself by smiling. You are impossible. Daniel's mouth curved slightly. It was gone as quickly as it appeared. When the shift ended, Lena stepped outside into the cold, pulling her coat tight. The sky was already darkening, snow beginning to fall again. Daniel emerged a few minutes later, gloves tucked into his pocket. They walked back toward the cabin together, neither of them speaking for the first half-mile. Finally, Lena broke the silence. You did not have to do that, she said again. Work there. I know. Then why? She stopped herself. Daniel did not slow. He did not turn. She exhaled, the question dissolving before it could fully form. At the cabin, Daniel went straight to the stove, adding wood with the same care as always. Lena hung her coat, watching him from the doorway. You could be doing something else, she said quietly. Daniel closed the stove door and stood. I am. She looked at him, then really looked. The answer did not settle anything. It opened something. That night, as the wind rose and the snow pressed against the windows, Lena lay awake longer than usual, listening to the familiar sounds of the cabin. Daniel's footsteps, the dog shifting near the door, the clock marking time without urgency. One question had been answered, in part. Daniel Frost did not do things because he needed to. The new question stayed with her as sleep finally came. If he did not need to, then why did he choose to? The cabin felt different after that day. Nothing had moved. The chairs stayed where they were. The clock continued its quiet marking of time. The fire burned the same way it always had. And yet, something in the air had shifted, subtle enough that it could be missed if you were not paying attention. Lena Harper noticed it immediately. Daniel Frost did not mention the lodge again. He returned to his routine as if nothing unusual had happened. Coffee in the morning. The dog at his side, would stacked neatly by the door. The same slow, contained movements. But there was a pause now, not in what he did, and how long he stayed in each place. Lena felt it in the mornings, when she came into the main room and found him already seated at the table, eyes on the window, the mug untouched for a moment longer than before. She felt it in the evenings, when they shared the same space, but spoke even less than usual, the quiet stretching just a little farther. They did not argue. They did. Not confront. They simply adjusted around each other, like two people learning the edges of something new without naming it. At the lodge, Lena worked as she always had. Her hands moved through familiar tasks. Sheets folded, shelves dusted, books returned to their places. But her attention wandered in ways it had not before. She caught herself listening for footsteps that were not there. She caught herself watching the door. When she realized what she was doing, she stopped. That night, the wind came in harder than usual. It pressed against the cabin walls, steady and insistent, rattling the windows in a way that made the glass hum softly. Snow fell thick and fast, erasing the path outside almost as soon as it formed. Daniel checked the latch once. Then again, Lena watched from the table, her hands wrapped around a mug that had long since cooled. It is going to keep coming down, she said. Daniel nodded. Yes. He did not add anything else. She waited, then spoke again. You do not have to walk him tonight. The husky lay near the door, head on its paws, eyes open. Daniel glanced at the dog. He'll want to go. I can do it, Lena said. He looked at her then, not surprised, not resistant, just still. After a moment, he handed her the leash. Outside, the cold hit hard, sharp enough to take her breath for a second before settling into something manageable. Snow swirled in the porch light, thick and unbroken. The dog moved confidently, leading her just far enough from the cabin to feel the open space, then circling back. Lena breathed slowly, each inhale deliberate, each exhale visible in the dark. The world narrowed to that rhythm. Step, breath, snow. When she returned, Daniel had already added more wood to the fire. The warmth inside felt immediate, enveloping. She hung the leash on the hook and stood there for a moment, hands resting at her sides. You do not like people seeing you, she said quietly. Daniel did not look at her. He adjusted the log until it settled properly, then closed the stove door. I do not mind being seen, he replied. She considered this. That is not the same thing. He turned then, meeting her gaze fully. No, he said. The silence that followed was not empty. It was held, suspended between them. Lena sat back down at the table, her chair scraping softly against the floor. She placed her mug in front of her, but did not lift it. I'm not trying to figure you out, she said. Daniel nodded once. I know, and I am not asking you to explain, she added. I know. She exhaled slowly, the tension in her shoulders easing just enough to notice it. Outside, the wind continued its low, constant sound, a reminder of the world pressing in. Inside, the light remained warm. They spent the rest of the evening in parallel, not together, not apart. Lena read near the window. Daniel sharpened tools at the counter, each stroke careful, controlled. At one point, Lena looked up and caught him watching the fire, not the book, not the clock. She did not interrupt. If you have ever sat in a room where words would only make things smaller, you understand what held them there. There was a question between them now. Not spoken, not demanded. Why a man who did not need to work had chosen to. Why he had done it where she could see, and what that meant for the space they shared. Later, as they prepared for bed, Lena paused at the doorway to her room. Daniel, she said. He looked up. You do not owe me anything. He considered this, then nodded. Neither do you. She smiled faintly and stepped inside, closing the door gently behind her. That night, sleep came slowly. Lena lay listening to the familiar sounds of the cabin. The clock, the fire settling, the dog shifting near the door. Her breathing slowed, steady and intentional, matching the quiet around her. If you're listening to this now, it might help to do the same. A slow breath in, a longer breath out. Let the space between thoughts stretch just a little. In the other room, Daniel sat longer than usual, the book unopened in his hands. He did not reach for it. He did not move. He simply stayed. And in that stillness, the distance between them did not grow. It held. The next few days did not bring answers. They brought structure. Snow fell, stopped, then fell again, laying down thin layers that erased and redrew the path outside the cabin. Inside, the routine held. Morning light, coffee, the dog waiting by the door, the clock keeping, time without urgency. Lena Harper noticed that Daniel Frost had shifted one small thing. He began leaving his book on the table instead of the shelf. Not open, not marked, just there. It was subtle enough to mean nothing, or something. On the fourth morning after the storm, Lena woke to a different sound. Not footsteps, not the stove. A knock, soft, controlled. She opened her door to find Daniel standing in the hallway, coat already on, gloves in hand. I'm heading into town, he said, for supplies. She paused. This was new. I can come, she offered, then stopped herself. If you want. Daniel considered it. Not long. Just enough. Yes, he said, if you do not mind the cold. She nodded. I do not. They drove in silence, the truck moving steadily over the packed snow. Outside, the trees leaned in close, heavy with frost. Inside, the heater hummed, steady and even. At the store, Daniel moved with quiet efficiency. He selected what was needed. No extras. No hosetastion. Lena noticed how people greeted him. Not warmly, not formally, simply with recognition. He returned each nod without stopping. At the counter, the clerk asked, "Same as usual?" Daniel replied, "Yes." Lena looked away, not because she was uninterested, but because she did not want to turn curiosity into pressure. Back at the cabin, they unpacked together. Daniel placed items where they belonged. Lena followed his lead, learning the order without being told. At one point, she reached for a shelf and stopped. "Is this all right here?" she asked. Daniel glanced over. Yes, that was enough. Later, as the afternoon settled, Lena sat near the window, mending a tear in her glove. Daniel worked at the counter, measuring, cutting, fitting a small piece of wood to reinforce a loose corner of the doorframe. Neither spoke. When he finished, he tested it once, then stepped back. "Better," he said. Lena nodded. "Thank you." He shook his head slightly. "It was already fine. This is just quieter." She smiled at that, not directly at him, but at the idea of quiet being something you could improve. That evening, after dinner, Lena stood by the sink, rinsing dishes. Daniel dried them without being asked, placing each one back in its spot. Their hands did not touch. They did not need to. When the last dish was set aside, Lena leaned back against the counter. "I should say something," she began. Daniel turned, attentive but still. "I'm not planning to stay forever," she said. "Here, in the cabin." He nodded. "I know. I just do not want there to be confusion," she added. "About why I am here." "There is not," Daniel replied. She studied him for a moment, then nodded. "All right." That was the boundary. Not drawn sharply. Not tested. Simply acknowledged. The following morning, Lena left earlier than usual. A longer shift at the lodge. Extra rooms to prepare for a group arriving from out of state. Daniel did not see her off. He left a thermos by the door. No note. She found it, paused, then took it with her. That night, she returned later, the sky already dark, snow beginning to fall again. Daniel was in the main room, reading, the dog asleep at his feet. "You are late," he said. "Yes," she replied. They arrived early. He closed the book and set it aside. "There is food." She warmed it and ate quietly. Afterward, she sat across from him, the table between them unchanged. "You did not have to do that," she said, gesturing to the thermos she had placed on the counter. "I know," Daniel replied. She waited. He did not add anything. "I appreciated it," she said instead. He nodded once. Outside, the wind picked up, pushing snow against the windows in soft bursts. The cabin held. If you have ever felt a relationship shift without a dramatic moment to mark it, you understand what happened then. Nothing was solved. Nothing was confessed. But a small trust settled into place, like a stone set carefully into water, changing the flow without making a splash. They did not move closer. They did not move apart. They learned where the line was and how to stand on either side of it without fear. And for now, that was enough. The routine did not disappear. It shifted. Morning still came quietly, light pressing through the snow-covered trees before touching the cabin window. Coffee was still ground by hand. The dog still waited by the door. But there were small differences now, almost easy to miss. Daniel Frost no longer sat alone at the table when the kettle finished boiling. Some mornings, Lena Harper was already there, coat half on, thermos open, steam rising between them. Other mornings, she was gone before he woke, leaving the chair empty but pulled back into place, the way she always did. The rhythm held, but it was not the same rhythm anymore. One afternoon, the sky darkened earlier than expected. Snow had been falling lightly all day, the kind that looks harmless until it stacks quietly on the ground. By mid-afternoon, the road near the lodge had all but disappeared, the edges swallowed by white. Lena finished her shift and stepped outside, the cold sharper than it had been an hour earlier. The wind pushed at her coat, steady and insistent. She made it halfway down the path before her boot slid. It was not dramatic. No fall, just a sudden loss of balance, enough to send her hand out toward the nearest tree. She caught herself, heart thudding once, then again, before settling. Behind her, footsteps approached. Dana did not call out. He stopped a few feet away, close enough to be there, far enough not to startle her. Slow down, he said. She turned, surprised. I did not hear you. I was behind you, he replied. She nodded, adjusting her footing. The ice is worse near the bend. Yes, Daniel said. It usually is. He did not offer his arm. He did not take the lead. He simply walked beside her for the rest of the way, his pace matching hers without effort. At the cabin, he shoveled the steps without comment, clearing a wider path than necessary. Lena watched from the porch, brushing snow from her sleeves. You do not need to do that, she said. Daniel continued, steady strokes, the sound of the shovel cutting through snow clean and even. I know, he replied. When he finished, he leaned the shovel against the wall and stepped inside, removing his boots with practiced care. The fire was already going. Lena poured water into the kettle and set it on the stove. The movement felt natural now, not borrowed. They sat together, mugs warming their hands, the wind rattling the windows harder than before. Someone at the lodge mentioned you today, Lena said after a while. Daniel looked up. What did they say? Just that you helped last week. Fixed the railing. Shoveled after the storm. She paused. They said it was kind of you. Daniel nodded once. It needed fixing. She watched him over the rim of her. Mug, that is all you're going to say. Yes. She smiled faintly, then let it go. Later that evening, as the snow piled higher outside, the power flickered once, then held. Daniel stood and checked the radio, turning the dial slowly until he found a clear signal. He listened for a moment, then turned it off. Storm will pass by morning, he said. Lena nodded. They always do. That night, she dreamed of nothing in particular. Just snow falling, footprints filling in behind her. In the morning, the world looked different. Not brighter, just quieter. The storm had passed, leaving behind a thick, unbroken layer of snow that softened every sound. The path outside the cabin was gone, erased completely. Daniel stood at the window, coffee in hand, watching the husky press its nose against the glass. We will need to clear that, Lena said, coming up beside him. Yes, Daniel replied. They worked together without discussion. Daniel shoveled. Lena followed, packing the snow down where it needed to be firm. Their movements found a rhythm easily, neither rushing the other. At one point, the shovel caught on something hidden beneath the snow. Daniel paused, knelt, and brushed away the top layer with his gloved hand. A small metal marker emerged, weathered, almost invisible against the ground. Lena stopped. What is that? She asked. Daniel looked at it for a moment longer than necessary. A boundary marker, he said. For what? The property line, Daniel replied. She studied the marker, then the trees beyond it. It does not look important. It is, he said. She did not ask why. They finished clearing the path and returned inside, cheeks cold, hands warming slowly around their mugs. That afternoon, Lena noticed something else. Daniel opened a drawer near the desk to retrieve a pen. Inside, she glimpsed a folded photograph, the edge worn, the image turned face down. He closed the drawer quickly, not hiding it, simply restoring order. She pretended not to see. Later, while preparing dinner, she burned her fingers slightly on the pot. Nothing serious, just enough to sting. Daniel was at her side immediately, taking the pot off the heat and setting it aside. Cold water, he said. She ran her hand under the tap. He handed her a towel, then stepped back, giving her space. You all right? He asked. Yes, she replied. Just careless. He nodded, accepting that. The routine resumed, but it carried weight now. Small movements had consequences, not dramatic ones, quiet ones. That evening, as the light faded and the snow outside caught the last of it, Lena sat by the window, watching the world settle. Do you ever miss it? She asked suddenly. Daniel did not respond right away. Miss what? He asked. The noise, she said. Other places. He considered this, then shook his head. I notice it more when it is gone. She smiled at that, not because it explained anything, but because it felt true enough to stand on its own. If you're listening closely, you might notice how routines change without breaking. How a walk becomes a shared walk. How a path cleared once must be cleared again, but differently. And how the past does not always arrive loudly. Sometimes it shows up as a marker under the snow, half buried, waiting to be noticed. The fire burned steady. The cabin held, and somewhere between what had been and what was forming, the quiet world of Alaska continued, patient as ever. The first consequence did not arrive loudly. It came the way most things did in Alaska. Quiet, practical, unavoidable once it appeared. It started at the lodge. Lena Harper was halfway through her afternoon shift when a manager called her into the small office near the back. The heater hummed too loudly in the corner. A clipboard lay open on the desk. "We have had a few comments," the manager said, not unkindly. "Nothing serious." Lena stood still, hands folded in front of her. "About what?" "About the man you stay with," the manager replied. "Daniel." Lena did not react right away. "He helped out during the storm," the manager continued. "Some people assumed he worked here. Others assumed he was more than that." Lena waited. "There are no rules against guests," the manager said. "I just want to be clear. You keep your work here separate. No confusión." "There is no confusion," Lena said. The manager nodded, satisfied enough. "Good. That is all." Lena returned to her tasks, but the rhythm felt altered. Not broken, just slightly off. By the time her shift ended, snow had begun falling again, light but persistent. She stepped outside and paused, pulling her coat tight. Daniel Frost was already there. He stood near the edge of the parking area, hands in his pockets, the husky sitting patiently at his side. He did not approach. He waited until she noticed him. "You did not need to come," Lena said as she reached him. Daniel nodded. "I know." They walked back toward the cabin together, the path familiar now, even as it filled in with fresh snow. Halfway there, Lena slowed. "They talked to me today," she said. Daniel did not ask who. "About you," she added. He glanced at her. "And they asked me to keep things clear," she said. "At work." Daniel stopped walking. Lena turned to face him, the falling snow softening the edges of his coat, his shoulders dusted white. "I told them there was nothing to explain," she said. Daniel considered this. Was that true? She met his gaze. Yes. He nodded once and resumed walking. At the cabin, the warmth met them as usual. Daniel removed his coat and hung it on the hook. Lena did the same. For the first time since she had arrived, she hesitated before speaking. "I do not want this to complicate things," she said. Daniel turned toward her, attentive. "Things here," she clarified. "Or there." He did not answer immediately. "There are already lines," he said finally. "They do not move unless someone pushes them." She let out a breath she had not realized she was holding. "I'm not pushing." "I know," Daniel replied. That night, the wind rose again, pressing against the windows with steady force. Daniel checked the latch, then the radio, listening briefly before turning it off. "The road will be bad tomorrow," he said. Lena nodded. "I can walk if I need to." Daniel looked at her. "I can drive you." She paused. "You do not have to." "I know." She studied his face, searching for something that was not there. "All right," she said. In the morning, the road was worse than expected. Snow had drifted overnight, the wind shaping it into uneven ridges. Daniel drove slowly, hands steady on the wheel, eyes on the narrow strip of visibility ahead. At the lodge, he dropped her off without getting out. "I will be back this way," he said. "Call if you need to stay late." She nodded. "Thank you." As she stepped out of the truck, she noticed two people watching from the window. Inside, the day passed in fragments. A comment here, a glance. There, nothing overt, nothing she could point to and name. But it was enough. When her shift ended, she walked back alone. Daniel did not meet her halfway this time. At the cabin, he was splitting wood, movements controlled, deliberate. He stopped when he saw her. "You walked," he said. "Yes." "You did not call." "No," he nodded, accepting that. She stepped closer, brushing snow from her sleeves. "This is what I mean," she said. "Small things add up." Daniel set the axe aside. "They always do." "I'm not asking you to stop being here," Lena said. "I'm asking us to be careful." He met her gaze. "About what?" "About how it looks," she replied. "And what it costs." Daniel was quiet for a moment. "Then we should be clear," he said. She waited. "I will not come to the lodge again," he continued. "And I will not make decisions that place you in the middle." Lena frowned. "I did not ask for that." "I know," Daniel said. "I am choosing it." She searched his face, then shook her head slightly. You do not have to give things up because of me. I am not, he replied. I'm setting a boundary. The words landed heavier than she expected. Inside the cabin, the evening settled in its usual way. Dinner, dishes, the dog asleep near the door. But the space between them felt newly defined. Not colder, sharper. Later, as Lena prepared for bed, she paused in the doorway. This does not mean I am leaving, she said. Daniel looked up from the table. I did not think it did. She nodded, satisfied enough, and closed the door. That night, sleep came slower for both of them, not because of what had been lost, but because something had been named quietly and could not be unnamed. Actions had weight, even small ones. And in Alaska, where the ground remembered every step until the next snowfall, that weight mattered. The cabin settled into a quieter version of itself after that. Not emptier, just more deliberate. Daniel Frost woke before the light, as he always did, but this time he stayed still for a few minutes longer, listening. The wind had calmed overnight. Snow rested against the walls without pressing. The dog slept near the door, breathing slow and even. Daniel sat up, pulled on his sweater, and moved through the room without turning on the lamp. Coffee came first. The grinder turned. Water heated. Steam rose and disappeared. Nothing in the routine changed, except his attention. He noticed the second chair at the table. The way it was pushed in when Lena Harper left early. The way she always returned it to the same angle when she stayed. He noticed the thermos was no longer by the door. That had been his choice. He sat with his mug and watched the light begin to reach the snow outside, the trees slowly taking shape. The world did not ask him for anything. It simply waited. Later that morning, Lena came into the main room, already dressed for work. She paused when she saw him sitting there. You're up early, she said. He nodded. So are you. She smiled faintly and reached for her coat. They did not mention the lodge. They did not mention the drive. Instead, Lena stopped near the counter and looked at the small stack of wood by the stove. You res-tacked it, she said. Yes, Daniel replied. It was fine before. Yes. She considered that, then nodded, as if the answer fit where it needed to. I will be late tonight, she said. There is a group arriving. All right, Daniel said. She waited, then added, do not wait up. He looked at her, then nodded once. I will not. She left quietly, closing the door with care. Daniel stood there for a moment after she was gone, the silence expanding to fill the space she had occupied. He put on his coat and took the dog out, choosing a longer route this time, deeper into the trees where the snow was less packed and the path less certain. They walked without urgency. At a clearing he rarely used, Daniel stopped. The dog circled once, then sat. Daniel looked out at the trees, their branches heavy, their trunks dark against the white ground. This place had not changed. It had been here before him and would remain after. He thought about the lodge, about how easily he had stepped into work he did not need, how natural it had felt, how quickly it had cost Lena something she had not asked to give. He had believed that choosing restraint would be enough. Now he understood it was only the beginning. Daniel turned back toward the cabin, the decision forming without words. The rest of the day passed quietly. He repaired a loose board on the porch, cleared the path again, though no one had walked it since morning. He cooked a simple meal and ate alone. When evening came, the sky darkened fast, snow beginning to fall again, fine and steady. Lena returned later than usual. Daniel heard her boots on the porch and stood before she reached the door, opening it for her. You did not wait up, she said, noticing the cleared table. No, he replied. She stepped inside, brushing snow from her sleeves. Her shoulders dropped slightly as the warmth reached her. Thank you, she said, not specifying for what. Daniel nodded. They ate together, quietly, the rhythm familiar but different now. Afterward, Lena rinsed her plate and set it aside. I am thinking of taking an extra shift, she said. Just for a while. Daniel looked at her. Because of me? She met his gaze without hesitation. No, he believed her. All right, he said. She hesitated, then spoke again. And I want to be clear about something. He waited. I am here because I choose to be, she said. Not because I need anything. I know, Daniel replied. And whatever you decide, she added, I will respect it. The words settled between them, unforced. That night, Daniel did not sit with his book. He stood by the window, watching the snow fall, the light from inside reflecting faintly against the glass. He understood something then. Not all realizations arrive as answers. Some arrive as limits. He could stay exactly as he was and keep everything contained. Or he could adjust, quietly, without explanation, and accept what that meant. Neither choice was dramatic. Both carried weight. If you're listening now, you might recognize this moment. The one where nothing is demanded, but something becomes clear anyway. When the next step is not about doing more, but about doing less, more carefully. Daniel turned away from the window and extinguished the lamp, leaving the room in soft darkness. In her room, Lena lay awake for a while, listening to the familiar sounds of the cabin settling. She did not wonder what he was thinking. She did not need to. She trusted the space they had built enough to let it hold what came next. Outside, the snow continued its quiet work, covering old marks, preparing the ground for whatever steps would follow. Night arrived the way it always did in Alaska. Quietly, the snow fell in fine, steady lines, barely visible unless the porch light caught it just right. The trees stood unmoving, their branches heavy, holding the weight without complaint. The world outside the cabin felt vast and contained at the same time, as if nothing beyond the tree line needed to be decided tonight. Inside, the cabin was warm. Daniel Frost moved through the familiar, closing ritual of the day. The fire was banked low, enough to hold through the night. The kettle was empty and set aside. The clock ticked softly on the wall, steady and unbothered. Lena Harper sat near the window, a blanket pulled loosely around her shoulders, watching the snow settle where it could still be seen. Neither of them spoke. There was no need to. The day had already said what it needed to say. Daniel paused near the table, one hand resting on the back of the chair he had moved earlier. He did not sit. He simply stood there for a moment, looking at the quiet space between them. Outside, a gust of wind passed through the trees, brief and gentle, then disappeared. Lena turned her head slightly. "It is going to snow all night," she said. Daniel nodded. "Yes. That means the path will be gone by morning." "Yes." She smiled faintly, not turning toward him. "It always comes back." He looked out at the darkened shape of the trail beyond the glass. "It does." The dog lifted its head, adjusted its position near the door, then settled again, satisfied. Lena stood and folded the blanket, placing it carefully over the chair. She moved toward her room, then paused. "Good night, Daniel," she said. "Good night, Lena," he replied. She closed the door gently behind her. Daniel remained where he was, the cabin quieter now, but not empty. He walked to the window and rested his palm lightly against the glass. The cold pressed back, distant and contained. For a long moment, he simply watched the snow fall. There was no sense of urgency, no feeling that something had been left undone. Only the awareness of a space that had been shaped carefully, not filled, not claimed. When he finally turned away, he extinguished the last lamp, leaving the room in a soft, familiar darkness. In her room, Lena lay listening to the sounds she had come to recognize. The fire settling, the clock marking time, the wind brushing past the cabin walls without pushing. Her breathing slowed naturally, falling into the same rhythm the place seemed to hold for anyone willing to stay long enough. If you're listening now, you might notice that rhythm too. The way quiet can feel like shelter. The way not knowing what comes next can be a relief instead of a threat. Outside, the snow continued its patient work, covering the ground without asking permission, preparing it for whatever footsteps might come tomorrow. Inside, two people slept under the same roof, not bound by promises, not pulled by answers, only held by shared understanding that some things do not need to be decided all at once. Morning would return. The path would reappear, and whether they walked it together or separately was not a question that needed an answer tonight. For now, Alaska kept its silence, and the cabin held. If this quiet has stayed with you, you can let it carry you a little longer. Rest here, and when you are ready, the story will still be waiting.